Welcome to our Montessori Thrive parenting series. If you're here for the first time, we host these parenting series twice a year to support Montessori parents because a big part of being a Montessori parent is, learning a little bit more about our approach to education. So we want to make that accessible and easy. So that's why it's always nice to have these virtual calls. This call is recorded, so if you have to drop off early, you can always view the recording later. And if you're viewing it as a recording, welcome. You can drop your comments in the comment section under the recording, and we'll get to those as well. Today, we are having a presentation that focuses on the science behind Montessori because Maria Montessori was, after all, a scientist. And our presenter today is Donna de Husselter. She's here. She's our CEO, and she was a school educator for many years and a school administrator for 24. So we're very fortunate to have her sharing her experience and just to share a little bit more about the science behind Montessori. If you have questions throughout the presentation, feel free to utilize the chat. I know Donna mentioned to me that she'll be asking a couple questions throughout the presentation. So you might have to answer. You can do that in the chat section. All right, Donna, I'll hand it over to you.
Wonderful. Well, welcome everybody. I'm really glad you're here. I usually start out with asking who we have in our group. Is the chat is open? Yes? Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Then what I want to know is, are you a Montessori parent, a Montessori soon-to-be parent, or a school, part of a school as a personnel? It could be teachers, could be administrators, whatever. Just so we know who's here this evening, just drop parent or school into the chat. That would be fantastic.
Here we have
And
it.
let me tell you a little bit more about me. So yes, I owned a school for 24 years, but long before that, I was a Montessori parent, just like you. I had never heard of Montessori. My son was 3.5. We had moved to a new city. I knew he needed something. I sure as heck didn't want just daycare because, of course, my son was brilliant, as everybody's is. And I literally opened the phone book because I'm old and found a Montessori school under the A's. And I called them thinking, I have no idea what this is, but what the heck. And the administrator told me a little bit about it, and I was intrigued. And I went to visit them, and I was more intrigued, and I enrolled my son. And it probably took less than 2 months before I fell in love. I couldn't believe how much he loved learning, how much he looked forward to going every single day. And then I got the opportunity to train as a Montessori teacher. And that to me was the most exciting thing ever because I was a parent of 2 boys and I wanted 12, and that wasn't going to happen. So being with 3, 4, and 5-year-olds for the rest of my life sounded pretty darn good. And then we moved to Phoenix and I ended up opening a school because I'm very opinionated about what Montessori should look like. And that was a magical experience, 24 years of working with children and parents. So yes, I have lots of experience, but I also have experience being a parent and know what that feels like, particularly when I was brand new and didn't know anything. And what we're going to talk about tonight is a subject that doesn't get addressed, I don't think, often enough. We talk about all the benefits of Montessori, but we don't talk about why we do what we do and how it came to be. And so that's what we're going to visit this evening is, why is Montessori so different? What makes it so different? Moving on. So first there's Maria Montessori. For those of you who don't know, she was a doctor. In fact, she was a doctor and a scientist. She started her career as a mathematician, which was unheard of in Italy in the 1800s. And then she decided, I want to go to med school. And she was the only female that was accepted to med school at the time. And it was such a backward society back then that She wasn't allowed to go into the cadaver lab where the bodies were to learn with any of the male students. So she did her medical studies in the middle of the night, all alone with the cadavers. That takes a lot of determination. And she went on to become a pediatrician and a pediatric psychiatrist. So she was pretty determined to understand human beings. And she understood that observing human behavior led to understanding human development. Now, how did she come to that conclusion? Actually, really early on. Her very first assignment as a psychiatrist was in an institution. Back in the early 1900s, if your child had any form of either deformity or handicap, parents didn't want to keep them around and they put them in institutions to hide them away. They felt that this was a punishment on them to have a child with these issues. And Maria Montessori, on her very first day, was taking a tour of this institution, and they were in the cafeteria. And the director of the institution said, "Oh my God, these children are like animals. They get down on the floor and they eat the crumbs off the floor." But Maria Montessori saw something different. What she saw was the children weren't eating those crumbs. They were arranging them. They were sorting them. They were manipulating them. And to her, that meant there was a whole lot more going on. And that was the beginning of her desire to understand how human beings develop, whether they have any issues or not. And over the years, she wrote a dozen books explaining what her observations told her. She spent 35 plus years observing in educational settings. She was never a teacher. She never wanted to be a teacher. She set up classrooms, brought in someone to run them, and then said, "I'm just going to watch." And that's what she did. And her observations, without any judgment, allowed her to come up with the theories about how humans develop that she did. And you know, the amazing part of this is that it's only since 1985 that we've been able to prove what she wrote about 100 years ago. Because the advent of the MRI allowed us to see inside the brain and see how things were developing, how certain areas of the brain developed at certain times, how they looked and what it felt like. And we could look at an infant's brain or a teen's brain or an adult's brain. And then the PET scan came along and we could actually see how the brain was firing at certain times. If a child was doing a certain activity, what parts of the brain were engaged at that moment? And that's when we started to be able to prove, believe it or not, that her writings were absolutely accurate. Next. So, what did she see? Well, Dr. Montessori wrote about something called the absorbent mind. She said that there is a period of time from birth to age 6 when the human being can absorb information like no other. In fact, during the absorbent mind period, the ability to learn new things is infinite. They can learn so many things all at one time. And she described that as being able to geometrically understand, and we're going to talk about it in more detail, but geometrically understand what they were hearing, seeing, touching, feeling, absorbing. Now, what do we know about brain development? Well, we know that an infant is born with about 90% of their neurons, but only about 10% of their synaptic connections. Those connections are what allow us to use information, store information, and they are stored based on experience. And the amazing part about all of this is that we know during the first year of life, those connections are forming at such an incredible rate that sometimes it's 1,000,000 a second. In the second and third year, it tapers off a little bit. And in the fourth and fifth year, it slows down considerably. That really aligns with her absorbent mind, birth to age 6. Do we still learn after age 6? Of course we do. But now it's more about creating new pathways to information than literally adding new synapses. So it's a very different way that we learn. And we also start to learn, instead of geometrically, we start to learn in a linear fashion. Then she talked about sensitive periods, periods when the child could learn something faster and better than any other time in their life. And scientists now call this periods of excitement, periods of learning. All it depends on who you're reading, what they call it. But what we're seeing, and it's based on those PET scans, being able to see what's firing when, those periods that they're defining align almost perfectly with Dr. Montessori's sensitive periods. She discussed planes of development. She said, there's a lot in common between a 3 to 6 year old, I'm sorry, yes, a 3 to 6 year old or a birth to 6 year old and a teenager who's going through puberty. They've got all this craziness going on. Their brain is developing, their feelings are developing, everything is changing. They're learning the world in a new way. And then that the elementary years, which is a period of great stability, actually mimics that last period where we're starting to move out into the world and find a job. And what we're seeing is in neuroscience communities, that's exactly how they're defining things, that there are stages of growth that align with the planes of development. She also learned or also pontificated that movement in learning leads to better understanding. She said children who move master concepts faster and better than children who are asked to sit still. Now, understand she was a doctor, so she was predetermined, predisposed, if you will, in that she didn't believe in sitting still. Because in the early 1900s, when you went to school, you sat in curved wooden benches. And she was literally seeing deformities of the spine from sitting all day on those benches. So before she even started studying how the brain works, she was already going, no, children should move. They're not supposed to sit in one space because their skeleton is still developing. And you are causing deformation in the skeleton by making them sit all day long. And she also said order in the environment and the mind leads to clarity and higher executive function. And we are seeing study after study after study. In fact, if you search order in the environment and the mind, you're going to see unlimited studies that are talking about how important it is to have some form of order to help the human brain find clarity and to really feed that executive function, right? The prefrontal cortex. So the next several slides, we're going to talk about how the relationship of development corresponds to learning. Let's talk about that absorbent mind again in more detail. Because as a parent, this is one of those things that can be really impactful if you pay attention. So the absorbent mind is unlimited in its capacity. I said that before. It can take in infinite amounts of information. It doesn't care where it comes from because that information is coming in geometrically. So literally an infant sitting in the middle of a room that's super busy is hearing everything, smelling everything, experiencing through touch everything within its reach, being able to taste things because of course infants explore with their mouths and using the rest of their body to move as much as possible. So it's totally infinite. What does that mean? That means that we have an ability as parents during that first 6 years to introduce our children to everything. We do not have to worry that they won't understand. In fact, even a pre-verbal infant understands what we're saying, 99% of what we're saying by the age of 6 months. So don't stop talking and don't stop experiencing. There's a study right now, they're looking at whether or not the shutdown during COVID affected human brains, the children's brains who were born during that period, because their experience was limited. And I'll be really interested to see what we find out about that. The human brain learns effortlessly and unconsciously. The child doesn't know they're learning. There is no conscious, I want to learn that. It just goes in and it gets filed in the amazing file cabinet that is our brain. What that means is you can give them something or just put them in the room with something, and they will take in whatever they can from that experience. So the more experiences we give them, go to the grocery store, go to the park, go to family, go on vacations, go and go and go and go. So they have many, many, many rich experiences that they're recording. This one is not so. The absorbent mind does not discriminate. And what does that mean? It means that it doesn't judge whether this is good information or bad information. Is it useful or not useful? Is it harmful or not harmful? And this is where parenting becomes a really important piece, because if we allow a child to see the news, for example, and it's continually bad news, we know that, right? Negative, 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 then we are feeding negative ideas into that brain. If we introduce a child to a movie that's way beyond their capacity, and if they're under two, anything's way beyond their capacity, then they think of that as real because they don't know the difference. They can't tell if something's real or not real. Children at 3 and 4 actually think that cartoons are real. They can't discriminate between that and real life. If it's on the TV and it's moving around, it's real and I should believe it. What does that mean as parents? That means we need to be so careful about what we show them, because everything is going in and they don't know how to judge it. They just know it, you let them see it, so it must be real. And the other part of that is you can't erase something from the brain once it's in there. So a really bad experience never goes away. It can be dulled, or you can find ways to counteract it by positive experience, but it's a lot harder than never introducing that negative experience to begin with. And the other thing about the absorbent mind is it's finite in length. From birth to 3, Dr. Montessori said, and this, if you think about this, it's logical because this is mostly the pre-verbal stage. The child is not aware that they're learning. She called it the unconscious absorbent mind. They're just taking in and taking in and taking in and taking in. But it changes around the age of 3, and they become aware just as they start saying no, and you start seeing the representation of their will. They start to become aware that they can learn. And that's when they start asking, why, 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 why not? Why? And what do you do with that as parents? You take advantage of it. You feed them everything they can before the age of 3. And at the age of 3, from 3 to 6, you answer as many questions as possible, but only the question they asked. Don't go into a million details. In fact, one of my favorite ways to discern what is a child really asking me is to ask them a question back. And one of the ways that this bumps into parents frequently and makes them uncomfortable is, where do babies come from? Parents either go, I'll teach you that when you're older, or they start down the road of, okay, I'm going to tell you everything. Better to ask, what do you think? What have you heard? So that you get an idea of where they're going with their question. Because you want to answer the question they've asked, not the full spectrum that that question may represent. There's so much more to that. The sensitive periods. So Dr. Montessori identified many more sensitive periods than I've listed here, but some of these are the ones that are most important to us as parents. Language. From birth to 6, the child is in a sensitive period for language. I guess that's not surprising because this is when they start learning what language is and also learning how to use it, right? But there are some things about that sensitive period that are really important to know. That birth to three age, labeling everything, telling them everything. We're going to put your shoes on now. I need to change your diaper. You've wet your diaper. It's time to use the toilet. Would you like to have this or this to eat? Labeling everything is one of the best things that you can do to help them. And then from 3 to 6, using more definitive sentences when you're saying that. Do you smell that smell? I think that's cinnamon. Do you think that's cinnamon? Maybe it's nutmeg. What do you think? Giving them those experiences through language is really important. How important? Well, there's an incredible woman out of Chicago, Dr. Dana Suskind, who was studying how children learn language and how it affects later learning. And she discovered something really remarkable and very important for parents to know. And that is that a child learns vocabulary particularly well before the age of 3. And when they don't, there's really no way to make up for that later in life. She found that children of educated, well-to-do parents have typically heard 30 million more words than children of uneducated parents or parents who believe that children are better seen than not than heard. Maybe a cultural thing or something that their parents passed on, but talking to your baby, talking to your 2-year-old is very important. Now, the good news is that a 2-hour intervention, helping parents understand how important this is, absolutely makes the difference. But those children who do not get that vast experience with language by the time they're 3 are still showing the effects when they're 10 and 12 and 15. Their reading skills, their writing skills, everything. So if you have a little one, talk a lot. Doesn't matter what you talk about. Your baby doesn't care. If any of you remember the movie, and I'm really dating myself here, and now I'm not going to remember the name of it, but it was 3 men that inherited a baby, and one of them is reading the Wall Street Journal and going, and yesterday the New York Stock Exchange went up by 30 points. And the idea is it doesn't matter what you're reading, what you're saying. Talk to them, explain to them, tell them everything you're doing, share your life with them, because that's what's going to make a difference. Math is typically something that develops later because it takes a logical mind, and the prefrontal cortex doesn't start to develop till later. So 4 to 4.5 is when you start to see the mathematical mind. Children will start counting everything. And in the Montessori classroom, that's when we introduce a rich language program, right? Or I'm sorry, a rich math program that allows them, by the time they go through kindergarten, to have experienced addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, geometry at a small amount, and fractions. Can you imagine a 6-year-old adding and subtracting fractions? It happens in a Montessori classroom. Music. Dr. Montessori believed every child could have perfect pitch if we introduce music early. And what does that look like? It looks like us playing varieties of music to our infant. And then when they get into the Montessori primary classroom, the 3 to 6-year-old classroom, we're going to start introducing them to the notes of the scale and letting them experiment with that. And by the time they're 6, they could be writing music. It's an amazing thing to see. But allow your children to hear beautiful music and your favorite music, and to experience music with words and music without words, because all of those feed how much they love music, but they also feed the mathematical mind. Order. Oh my goodness. From 2 to 4, children love order. What does that mean to you as a parent? It means that schedules and routines are comforting and make children feel safe. A routine bedtime, a routine dinner time. What happens in the morning before I go to school? What does that look like? What does a weekend look like? It doesn't mean you can't be spontaneous and keep going. It just means think about the fact that your child is comforted during those years by knowing what's going to happen yet next. And the other thing that means is as you are doing new things, explain it to them ahead of time. We're going into a restaurant. You've never sat at a table and been expected to sit still. In a restaurant, we sit at our table. You may move around in the booth. You may play with your toys. You may talk to mommy and daddy, but we do not get up out of our chair. Letting them know those things in advance sets them and you up for a better experience. And then as they get older, one of the things that is incredibly important is that early elementary student is all about fairness. It's not fair. It's not fair. She gets to do it. I don't get to do it. How come she gets to do it? You said the rule was this. That's what it sounds like in a Montessori elementary classroom. And what you'll see and what you'll hear is that the lead is understanding that this isn't really about fairness. It's really about testing the rule and understanding where the boundaries are. And so the lead will say, thank you for bringing that to my attention. Or they'll say, what do you think should have happened? Because we're trying to create in that older child a logical conclusion and a problem-solving brain. And the last thing about sensitive periods is they're a very limited time. Once they're over, they're over. So taking advantage of teaching music, exposing them to music, or exposing them to language during those periods allows them to learn it faster and better than any other time. Movement in learning. So this time we're going to talk about what does the research say? Well, it says that physically active children have greater motor competence. That's not a surprise, is it? Children who move they have better balance, they have better sense of where they are in space, they're able to do things better, their coordination is better, and they mature better than their sedentary peers. Get out there and move. Physical activity during childhood also promotes cognitive development because children's minds, as they're walking across that bridge or that log, is thinking, what happens if I do this? Well, I have to keep my feet in line. How do I balance myself? What's the best way to keep myself in balance? They are reasoning how to do the things they're doing. And so giving them the freedom to try new things, even though they're a little bit dangerous or maybe a little scary to you, allowing them to experience that fear and then that success is super important. Physical activity boosts oxygen levels in the brain. That shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. Pumps blood through our system. So get them out there and get them moving. It doesn't hurt us either as adults, right? Believe it or not, movement allows children to absorb and process new information better. So a child that's listening, let's say, to a book on tape and moving or playing at the same time is going to be better able to answer questions about what they heard. Most of you have probably experienced this during reading, right? We constantly tell you as Montessorians, read to your child, read to your child, read to your child every night. And parents frequently will say to me, and I've experienced it myself, but they don't want to sit on my lap and read. They want to play while I'm reading. Don't stop reading. It's still going in. And if you doubt that, ask them a question. Or better yet, if you're reading their favorite book for the 100th time, skip a couple of pages and see what happens. They will immediately call you on it. And then humans learn best when the hand and the mind are moving together. The hand is directly connected to how the brain develops. So what does that look like in the Montessori classroom? Well, first of all, sitting should be a self-directed activity. You should not see adults telling a child they have to sit. Encouraging a child to sit with their work, yes, but telling them they have to sit and stay still, that shouldn't happen in Montessori because we know how important movement is. And best of all the lessons in the environment require movement. It doesn't matter what it is. If it's a math lesson, yes, they're going to sit while they do the actual math process. But before they sit, they have to go get paper. They have to go get a pencil. And none of these things are in the same place. They have to get to work. They might have to get something else. They're constantly moving. In language, we use movement as a way of teaching language. So we'll write a label and let them go find the object. All of those things help the brain to cement the concept. It's super important that we allow them to move. And the practical life lessons do the same thing, right? They are allowing a child to figure out where the end is. And so a child has the ability to decide that, and they can keep moving and moving and moving as long as their person, their brain, their body needs to move. They just keep doing because there's no set end in those works. Order in the environment and the mind. If you've been in a Montessori classroom, you know it looks really neat and clean and ordered. For some people, that feels really foreign. But to a young child, it tells them, I'm safe here. This environment is predictable. The research says that order promotes self-confidence and focus because the child doesn't have to worry about where things are. They know where they are. Consistency in the environment promotes confidence and self-assuredness. I feel good about this environment and I can be successful in it because, again, I'm not worried about it. I'm able to focus on what I'm doing. Predictability in the environment makes children feel safe. So, what's the routine like? Is it the same every day, even though there may be modifications? Can I expect that we're going to come inside at a certain time and work for a certain period and then eat lunch and play on the playground? Can I expect all of those things so that I feel like I have some sense of control? And that's in a toddler in particular, that 2 to 3 year old that's saying no, 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 that is one of the things that will promote no is making them feel like they have zero control over their life. They are just discovering that they have some control. So giving them the opportunity to have that control by keeping things consistent is really helpful. Conversely, too much order leads to stagnation and boredom. So what does that mean? That means that we don't want to control their movement so much that they feel stifled. As a parent, we try very hard then to give them those experiences, as I said in the last slide, that they can move and do things and try new things, even if they're a little bit scary. Because for this child, they look at you and they go, is mom scared? If mom's not scared, I'm okay. Is dad worried? If dad's not worried, it's okay. I can try this. They're looking to you to tell them, is this a possibility for me? In the classroom, everything has its own place. It's predictable. And we do that for the adults as much as for the children, because when you put something on the shelf in the Montessori classroom, it's in the order that we would typically present those lessons. So it gives the adults a sense of confidence that I know what comes next, but it also speaks to the child that they walk in the classroom, it's not rearranged every day. Things aren't put in different places. They can always find what they want. The routines and schedules are consistent so that they feel, I understand this, I'm comfortable with this. The sensorial materials, the pink tower, the red rods, and all the other materials provide clarity to organize the mind. So the whole point of the Montessori sensorial materials is to teach them what they've learned through their senses has a label and a purpose. That's the whole point. Because once you know what the name of something is and you understand what it's supposed to do, now you can use that information to learn new things and to talk about it. Many lessons, as I've said, don't have a specific end. That means that the child can use creativity. Is there only one way to build the pink tower? Heck no. There are at least a dozen, and every year a child comes up with a new way. That creativity is super important in a Montessori classroom. And most of the materials have that ability, which encourages the children to create new thought processes every single time they take the material off the shelf. So, things to consider in choosing education and also to consider as you're parenting. The traditional model of education is based on a factory. Everyone is doing the same thing. You educate as many children as you can at one time. Everybody gets the same information, regardless of how they interpret it or where they are in their development. They sit in a chair and they listen and they don't engage for most of the day. The expectation is their brain is an empty vessel waiting to be filled by this amazing pontificator that's the teacher. The sad part is that education in the United States, at least, changes directions every time we get a new leader. Could be the leader of the Department of Education, could be the president, but in any case, we just keep throwing things at the children and hoping something will stick. And it creates adults who are great at following directions, but not really free thinkers. Montessori, on the other hand, is based on how the brain actually develops, on what's happening inside your child, your individual child today. It honors what's happening at that moment. Is your child going through a growth spurt with their body and potentially they need some time to deal with that trauma before we push them to make some academic advance? Are they going through an emotional upheaval that we need to know about that affects how well they learn? It follows the latest information from neuroscience. We are constantly, particularly the organizations, AMI and AMS, the international organizations, are constantly following the research, talking to people that specialize in neuroscience, because what we want to know, and that goes with the next one as well, is that is there anything new that we are not aware of about how the brain develops? Because if there is, we need to evaluate, is the method we're currently using still the best method? If there's not, and honestly, there isn't a lot of new information because humans develop, human beings are developing today at pretty much the same they were 100 years ago, maybe even 500 years ago. Our culture has changed. What we need to know is different, but how our brain actually learns is pretty much the same. So why would we change how we teach it? And finally, Montessori leads to adults who are creative, problem solvers with great communication skills. If you doubt that, just look at Google. The Google guys, Facebook, all of these people started out in Montessori, and they credit Montessori for allowing them to be as creative and free thinking and outside the box as they are. I hope that's helpful. I'd be happy to answer questions or address specific situations that you're dealing with.
You can unmute yourself to ask a question. Yep. Or you can drop something in the chat, whatever you prefer.
Hi, I think you touched on the subject of the toddler control, like saying no, 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 or tantrums. Could you elaborate?
Sure, absolutely. So it's between the ages of 2 and 3 that a child becomes aware that they are separate from you. It's when they become conscious, they're their own person, and their will starts to develop. And so they know, and unfortunately, most toddlers have heard the word no more than a few times. Um, they know that that's a very powerful word. It's a word that you use when you don't want somebody to do something. So that's their first experience and the easiest thing for them to say. How do you deal with that as a parent? Well, the biggest thing you can do is give them choices. Instead of saying, it's time to go to bed now, because that immediately is, no, I don't want to go to bed. It becomes, it's time to head to the bedroom. Would you like to put on your pajamas first or brush your teeth first? Would you like to read one story or two stories? Would you like to have daddy read to you or mommy read to you? There's so many ways that you can do that. Now, the important thing about choices, they have to be acceptable choices. You would never be standing at the edge of the park saying to your toddler, it's time to go home now. Do you want to go or not? Right? But you might say, would you like to walk to the car or would you like me to carry you to the car? Would you like 1 minute to play or would you like to go now? Those are all acceptable choices. So you, the parent, are in control of the situation. But the more choices you give your child, do you want to wear the blue shirt or the red shirt? Do you want to wear the brown shorts or the black shorts? All of those things. Do you want to eat breakfast first or get dressed first? All of those things help your toddler to feel like they have some control. And that's super important between 2 and like 3.5, when they are really digging in with, no, I can do it myself. And oh, by the way, that's another one that's really important to understand. I can do it myself. Okay. Well, your choice is you may do it yourself or I will help you. But if you don't answer and say, I'm going to do it myself, or if you don't immediately move in that direction, I, as the adult, am going to say, oh, I see you want me to help you. No problem. And what is your toddler going to say? Your toddler's going to say, no, I do it. Oh, you know what? I know you can do it. But today you asked me to help you. Tomorrow you can do it by yourself. It doesn't take very many times of going through that process before the child goes, okay, I better answer because if I don't answer, she's going to take over. And you don't do it with anger. You do it, I'm being helpful. You asked me to help you. Was that helpful to you?
Yes, extremely helpful. Thank you. I love all the Montessori style choices. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. What about
Absolutely.
the picky eater that not wanting to eat?
Oh, and that is so typical of a toddler. That is so typical of a toddler. The thing that I keep reminding myself and parents is children will not starve themselves. Just keep offering and offering and offering. Just like a habit takes 20 times to ingrain, new foods are the same way. Children, and again, they're just becoming conscious, remember? So children who as infants would eat anything going through toddler go, no, I don't have to eat that. But you keep introducing it and you keep introducing it and you keep introducing it. There's a great book called The Montessori Toddler that has tips on how to get your toddler to eat. It's available on Amazon and it's an amazing book.
Any other questions?
Thank you, John. 3 men and a baby. I'm not here, but I am, I know. Anybody
I
else?
have a question.
Sure.
Sorry, it took me a minute to get unmuted.
Okay.
I loved your comments on the lack of discernment in that absorbent mind early period. And I totally get the news example. I'm curious, and I guess it totally depends on the content, but what is the harm in them believing like a cartoon is real? Cartoon characters, I guess. Like if we, yeah, I'm just curious about that layer.
Is there a harm? I think the only harm is that cartoon characters do things that humans cannot do. And the risk is that your child will believe those things can happen. Cartoon characters die and come back to life. They fall off cliffs and don't get hurt. They beat up on other people and nothing happens. So those kinds of things are the biggest risk. Does it hurt them to believe that I don't know, Elmo is real and not a puppet, or that Bluey is really a member of a family of whatever kind of animal that is. No, but it's what they do that can be risky. Can I tell you a story? And this
Yeah.
is a slightly older, child I'm dealing with because it's mine. Um, I had a 5-year-old. Now he's 5, okay? He's 5, and he loves weather. He thinks it's so cool. He's constantly asking me about clouds and storms and lightning and wind and all of these things. And oh my gosh, the movie Twister comes out. And I thought, oh, he loves reading about tornadoes. This would be really cool. Yeah, not so much. Because even though I skipped through all the places where people got hurt and just let him see the weather stuff, he became so obsessed with tornadoes that every time a dark cloud appeared in the sky, he would say, oh my gosh, there's going to be a tornado. He went to school and he would be walking around the classroom going, there's going to be a tornado. We're all going to die. I got called in the principal's office. And the only way we got past that was literally because Twister is one of the worst as far as editing ever. They're driving down the street. It looks like a 2-lane road, but when you turn around, when the camera turns around, there's a 4-lane road in their rear view. Or they say they're in Oklahoma and the street signs all say Texas. It was pointing out that this is not real that changed it for him. But it was a very hard 6-month period, and he was 5. I thought I could explain things, but he just absolutely took it as real and absorbed it and then manifested it. So that's just one story.
Thank you so much. That makes so much sense. And yeah, I think that clarifying the what versus the who, or like how, I think is super helpful.
Right. I think that cartoons are fine. You just have to be careful what they're doing. Anybody else? Well, one thing I want to say before everybody leaves, and that is that if you are a scientist at heart, or you really want to understand the science behind the genius that was Maria Montessori, there's actually a book. I don't know if you can see this. Yep, you can't because I'm blurred here. But it's called Montessori, The Science Behind the Genius. It was written by Angeline Stoll Lillard, Lillard. And Angeline grew up in Montessori. Her mom is one of the most famous current Montessorians around. And she set out as part of her doctoral thesis to disprove all Dr. Montessori's theories. She said, you know, this woman never did anything but watch children. How could these theories be correct? And in the process, she proved them all. Thank you very much, Camila. Yeah, it's an amazing book, but it is very much a science kind of book. Here's who did the studies, here's the research, here's what they did. So it's kind of dry, but it's amazing.
All right, if no one has any more questions, we'll go ahead and wrap up for the evening. I will be posting this recording on that same registration page that you used to sign up for the Zoom. I'm going to replace that link with the recording link. It'll be up by tomorrow. So if you want to reference this video, you want to review it, you can access it there. I see something coming in the chat. A thank you. Thank you all for coming, and thank you, Donna, for your wonderful presentation. It was really informative. I hope everyone kind of learned something new about Montessori education, or came away with a couple of new insights. You're getting a couple of thank yous in the chat. Oh, quick question. Yes, Lillian, go ahead. Are you
Feel
gonna,
free to unmute if that's easier.
yeah, you can unmute yourself or ask in the chat. Here she's asking, is there an age group that you recommend keeping kids in Montessori education until?
Oh, now you're getting into my passion. So let me tell you, as a parent and also as an experienced teacher, some of the things I've seen. First of all, does your infant toddler need to go to school? They don't, unless they can't be home with you. A Montessori infant toddler program absolutely is designed for that age group to maximize what's happening inside the brain. So if you have a little and you need childcare, I don't want you to think of Montessori as childcare, but they will provide care for your infant. And at the same time, they will maximize what's happening inside that human brain and allow your child to absolutely be the best they can be. From 3 to 6, I don't think there's any better place for a child to be. If you pull your child out in the kindergarten year, here's my analogy. I'm going to build a mansion. I am going to put in the richest wood floors. I'm going to put in crown molding everywhere. I'm going to have the very best appliances that money can buy. The floor plan is going to be exactly what I want. Oh, the roof? Yeah, no, we'll do the roof next year, maybe. What does the rest of that beautiful house look like a year from now when you forget to put on the roof? That's what the kindergarten year in Montessori looks like. It is the culmination of everything they've done to that period, because that kindergarten year is when a child realizes that they not only know things, but they can do things with that information. So it's a super important year. Elementary is phenomenal. Imagine the kinds of projects. My youngest son in lower elementary, he was really interested in airplanes. So he and a friend searched on how airplanes fly. And they wrote this all out as a report. And then they had the teacher make sure it was grammatically correct and beautiful. And they put it on poster boards, and they made illustrations of how planes fly. And they showed their class and explained it all. They presented it, so they were actually public speaking. And when they were done, Montessori has something called going out. And one of the dads was an airplane pilot, and he worked in an airplane simulator. In fact, he was the trainer in Atlanta at the 777, brand new plane at the time. He invited those two boys to come down and fly in the simulator, actually crash, because they thought that was totally cool because they were 8. But that was their experience. That kind of an understanding of aerodynamics doesn't happen in a traditional school. My older son was in 5th grade, and the teacher said, "Hey guys, you want to do a play?" And the kids said, yeah, let's do a play, let's do a play, let's do a play. Okay, great. I'm going to suggest that we do the Odyssey. So we're going to read the book. The Odyssey? Homer? Yeah, we're going to read the book. And then you guys can write a screenplay and we'll produce this play. What did the kids do? They wrote the screenplay. They created the costumes. They created the set design. They decided on the music. They auditioned and decided who would play each of the characters. Everything about that play, after having read the Odyssey, was something that they took on. Next year, we moved to Phoenix. There's no Montessori school. He ends up in a public school. And the teacher says, we're going to do the play, The Wizard of Oz. It's going to be so fun. And you can try out if you want to be in it. Okay, well, who are we going to audition in front of? The music teacher, because of course you're going to have to sing and move and be articulate. And who's going to make the costumes? Oh, the parents. And who's going to make the sets? Oh, the parents. And who's going to write the script? Oh, the teacher. The children in that play didn't learn anything about producing a play or the story behind it. All they learned was show up and memorize a line. Those are the differences, just a few of the differences between Montessori elementary and traditional. If you're going to move, I will tell you that there was a very famous private school in Atlanta, and parents would call them and say, where do we take our children to preschool? Because they didn't have a preschool. And they would send them down the street to us, Casa Montessori in Atlanta, and the parents would say, okay, and then we come over there in kindergarten. No, don't come over here in kindergarten. Don't do that. Oh, well then first grade? Nope, not yet. Well, then when do we bring our children to your private school? When they're entering third grade. Because by third grade, all of our students will be doing everything your Montessori student has been able to do since kindergarten. They'll be able to read, they'll be able to write stories, they'll be able to do math in addition and subtraction. They'll all be able to do that by the entering third grade. And that was their recommendation, not ours. So those are just a couple stories. It's an amazing program. And the other thing I will tell you is if you choose to go on to elementary every single year, and again, I've experienced this as a parent, you will ask yourself, is this still the right choice? There's no grades, there's no homework. Are my children really learning everything they need to learn? And you will come up with the answer for yourself based on your experience. My son got to 6th grade in a public school and was bored in 6th grade and was bored in 7th grade and was bored in 8th grade. And it wasn't until he hit high school that he actually felt like true learning was happening again. That's an amazing experience. And today, both of them are, well, one's a senior executive with Walmart and the other is a Montessori teacher. So anyway, that's a long story on when do you leave?
Any other last minute questions? All right, and again, if you're watching the recording to this, if you want to ask a question, you can comment under the video and I'll make sure that I get to Donna and we can respond and answer there because this will be posted on our YouTube channel and on that page. So if you want to ask something, if you're watching the recording, you absolutely can. Next week, we're going to have another session at the same time. We're going to be joined by Vandana Caruso to talk about Montessori at home, parenting with insight and presence. So if you're curious about how you can bring a little bit of Montessori into the home in a way that is beneficial to the child, then we hope to see you there. Let me just check to make sure everything in the chat has been answered. All right, thank you all for joining, and thank you again to Donna. All
You're
right,
welcome.
all right, everyone, have a great evening. Take care.